In 2003, in the spring of 2003, my mother told me and my 4 siblings and my father that we were taking her to see a 4.5-hour Russian opera at the Metropolitan Opera House for her 65th birthday. Now that's pretty normal for my mom because she loves the opera. She went on her own. She lives in the Connecticut shoreline, and she would take the train with her friends to see the opera. So we're like, yeah, that makes sense. We'll do that. Leading up to the big adventure, my older sister says that my mother has an ulterior motive. She doesn't just want to see an opera. She wants a man named Peter to see her family. First time I heard Peter's name, I was about 10 years old, and my father had lost his job, and my mother was weeping. And she said, "I should have married Peter." All of us kids heard that, and we didn't know what it meant. You see, when my mother was a high school senior, she and Peter were in love. And they went to the senior ball together, and after the ball, he disappeared from her life. They had been planning on getting married, but he disappeared, and she didn't know why. And here we are, 45 years later, and he looked her up on her alma mater website, and he found her. And it turns out that even though they were both from New Jersey, they were both living in Connecticut. And they had both been going to the Metropolitan Opera, sitting near each other in the Metropolitan Opera for years. After high school, Peter was forced to go into the military school by his father and into the military. And he married and had 4 children. Meanwhile, my mother, 4 years after high school, married my father and had 5 children. And my mother still pined for Peter. The bond between them was so strong, she never understood what had happened. The thing is that Peter was an alcoholic, and at one point, his family disowned him, kicked him out of the house. He was living on the streets of Manhattan and was saved by his recovery counselor, who he ended up falling in love with and marrying. And this woman loved opera. So somehow the second wife brought Peter back to the opera, and then Peter found out that my mother was there too. My parents never had a good marriage. They were Catholic, so they never divorced, but they were never happy. And when Peter came back into her life, the chemistry was still there. They started meeting at a dance school and dancing together. They talked of running away together. But first, I want you to see my children. So we took a limo to New York City, and we went and ate at a beautiful French restaurant, and we walked in our gowns and our suits over to Lincoln Center, across the plaza with the fountain. And by now, 3 of my siblings know about Peter, 2 of them don't. My father knows nothing. It's a Russian opera, and it's sold out, and there are all these Russian expats standing in front of the theater asking for tickets. And my husband and my brother-in-law, who knew what was about to happen, took my dad's ticket and their tickets and sold them without telling anyone and said, "We're going to a bar." So here I was with my siblings and my mother, and we went into the theater, And my mother said, "Let's all stand up and stretch." She wanted to be sure Peter could see us. By now, the operator had taken place, and my other two siblings knew what was happening, and it was quite difficult for us to feel on display. When we had intermission and we got up to go to the bathroom, we found ourselves standing in the bathroom line with Peter's wife. After the opera, without incident, we all went home, and my dad never found out. However, Peter's wife found all of the communications between my mother and him. And instead of running away, they decided to cut off the relationship to cause no more hurt. A few years later, he sent her his high school ring and told her he was dying of cancer. My mother was able to finally reconnect with him, but her children have never quite recovered. Thank you.